Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, in which we'll be taking a first look at our new Teaching Online and Learning Online courses using our test site. We're really excited to share these with you today and hope you'll enjoy finding out more about them. So you'll be hearing from 4 Epigeum representatives over the course of the next 45 minutes or so. First, I'll be starting things off. My name is Rosalind Wright, and I'm Marketing Manager at Epigeum. Then I will be joined by Naomi Wilkinson and Kat Rylance, who are the commissioning editors responsible for the courses that we will be seeing today, as well as Senior Academic Partnerships Manager Eleanor Camlin. And in terms of the agenda for today, I will start by giving you a very quick overview of Epigeum and our work, as well as a short introduction to the thinking behind these 2 new courses, before handing over to Kat, who will be introducing us to the new Teaching Online Next Steps in Design and Development course and providing us with a demonstration. And then Naomi will do the same for Learning Online, Essential Skills for Success. We will then pass to Eleanor, who will outline some of the ways that the courses can be rolled out and used in your university, as well as giving us a summary of some of the subscription options available to you. We'll then wrap up with any questions that you may have. And speaking of questions, everybody on the call today is currently muted to help avoid any audio issues. However, please do get involved and ask any questions that you may have at any time, or you can save them until the end if you prefer. You should all be able to see a control panel for the GoToWebinar software that we're using today. The panel is normally at the top or on the right-hand side of your screen and can be expanded or hidden by clicking on that small white arrow on an orange background. Within the control panel, you should see a questions drop-down, where you'll be able to type in your question, which we can then address at the end. So, to start with a very brief summary of who we are and what we do, Epigeum was established as a spin-out company from Imperial College London in 2005, before being acquired by Oxford University Press in 2015, to further the University of Oxford's objective of excellence in research, scholarship, and education worldwide. Over the past 15 years, we have developed, hosted, and maintained a wide range of interactive online training courses to support the core activities of hundreds of higher education institutions around the world. All our courses draw on evidence-based learning design, cutting-edge technology, and comprehensive subject knowledge to deliver training of the highest quality, anytime, anywhere, across 4 key areas: research, teaching and development, support and well-being, and studying. And today we're discussing 2 courses which sit within our studying and our teaching and development areas. Those courses are Teaching Online, Next Steps in Design and Development, and Learning Online, Essential Skills for Success. 2 resources which we have developed on an accelerated timescale as a direct response to the challenges and opportunities associated with our recent transition to online teaching and learning following disruption caused by COVID-19. Now, we knew that there was a need for support for members of teaching and learning support staff. Surveys undertaken by JISC, for example, or our own Oxford University Press, indicated that many instructors in higher education institutions had limited experience with online and digital teaching prior to the outbreak of COVID-19, and many expressed to us in our own research that they lacked confidence in this area and needed further guidance in order to take their online teaching further. Added to this, we understood that students also required support in this transition, having often also had limited experience in a purely online learning environment, and reporting varying levels of satisfaction with the online learning provision provided to date, as well as feelings of uncertainty and anxiousness associated with the many unknowns that they are facing. The challenge, therefore, as we saw it, was for universities having made that initial reactive move to digital teaching and learning to look to strengthen and enhance these experiences, supporting members of staff in acquiring key skills and exploring best practices, and equipping students with a clear sense of what to expect and how to prepare for and succeed in an online learning environment. And we have therefore produced 2 short courses that will help to do just that. So, let's dive right into our Teaching Online Next Steps in Design and Development course. And to lead us through this part of today's session and provide us with a demonstration of how it works in practice, I will now hand over to its commissioning editor, Kat Rylance.
Thanks, Rosalind. So, as Rosalind mentioned, when we set about developing teaching online next steps in design and development, we knew from the conversations that we'd been having that a huge amount of work had already been done across the sector to shift teaching online extremely quickly. And so we wanted to make sure that whatever we developed would add value to the brilliant work that had already been done. So really, we were looking at that next step. You've moved your lectures online, but how do you develop that further and make sure that you're providing the best learning experience possible for your students? So in this course, we've included lots of practical tips and real-life examples from universities across the country to help share those best practices and the lessons learned over the past few months. The course is really for anybody with teaching and learning support responsibilities. If you're new to online teaching or if you're looking for a refresher of your skills and knowledge, then this course is for you. We've aimed to keep this course as short as possible. We know that everybody's very time pressed at the minute, so we've kept it to 4 modules of around half an hour each, covering the real nuts and bolts of teaching online. As with all of our programmes, we've taken a collaborative approach to developing the content, and we've had the benefit of a range of reviewers involved in this programme, sharing their experiences and their thoughts on the content as it's gone through the development process. In terms of the actual content, as I mentioned, we've aimed to cover the key things anyone teaching online needs to know, and we've done this across 4 modules, each around 30 minutes in length. The first module has been designed to help you build the foundations of a great learning experience. So what are the key principles to bear in mind right at the start when you're designing your online session? It also covers different approaches to learning design, how to select and evaluate digital learning resources, and how to promote academic integrity in an online context. The second module seeks to build on the first. So now that you've got the fundamentals covered, how do you further develop that experience? This module really concentrates in on community building, strategies for communication, and adapting that continuous improvement approach to your online teaching practice. The third module really does what it says on the tin. So it explores strategies and formats for providing feedback and assessment in that online context. And finally, the fourth module focuses on aspects of inclusion and well-being, covering engagement, inclusivity, and the well-being both of yourself and how to support that of your learners. So without further ado, I wanted to give you a quick demonstration of teaching online next steps in design and development. So just to mention that as the courses haven't published yet, we'll be showing them to you today on our live build site. If you decide to request a trial or go ahead and purchase a license for the courses, then the site you will access will look slightly different in terms of the navigational buttons and the menu, which won't be down the side of the screen. So the first screen in Module 1 provides key orientation information for the user. If I click on the Introduction tab, you'll see it has information on who the course is for and the approach taken. The Learning Outcomes tab provides the learning outcomes for this specific module to help frame and clarify the learning. A tab on using the module provides information on how to navigate through the module, and it also calls out the key features in the course. So a real key feature in this programme are the practical tips pods. These have been added where relevant to provide real-life examples and tips from online educators to help share those lessons learned and those best practices across the sector. We also include useful links, which expand on the key concepts covered in the course. This provides further opportunities for anyone taking the course to follow up with some independent learning. Your context pods prompts learners to reflect on their own specific institutional context, and they're fully customizable. So, for example, we cover academic integrity in Module 1, and you'll see that at the top of the screen, there's a Your Context pod, which signposts the learner to consult their own specific academic integrity policy. And it may be that if you were to be using this course, your institution would customize this pod to add in the specific link to your academic integrity policy there. If I skip back to the welcome screen, you'll see the final tab here gives information on all of the brilliant people who've helped us develop and shape this course. So I wanted to show you a couple of screens in Module 1. As mentioned earlier, we kick off the programme by covering the key principles and overarching approaches to learning design that you'll want to bear in mind when designing the online learning experience. You'll see that each screen has an indication of the length of time it will take to complete. This screen is 6 minutes, but the majority of the screens in this course are between 3 and 5 minutes long. That's because we know how time pressed everyone is, so we wanted to provide a course that was as concise as possible and to deliver the learning in bite-sized chunks. You'll also notice that we've tried to keep flat text to a minimum, so we've broken the text up by including bullet points just to make the learning more accessible there. And we've also included definitions of key terms where they're first mentioned in the course. So here you'll find a definition of blended learning and also a definition of flipped learning. These definitions are also included in a glossary for the course, so that the learner can download a copy of the glossary either to save for reference or to print off and have to hand as they navigate their way through. If I scroll down to the first activity, you'll notice that this is a drag and drop activity, which prompts the learner to think about the associated benefits and challenges of synchronous and asynchronous learning to help frame the planning of their online session. If I quickly work through this activity, you'll see that if I get the answer wrong, it takes me back to the top. And then at the end of the activity, I can click on the View Summary button and it shows me my answers there, which I can either copy and paste and save in a Word document, or I can print to refer back to at a later date. As I mentioned, we've got lots of practical tips throughout the course to provide those useful tips and real-life examples. And here we have a nice example of different synchronous and asynchronous activities that educators have used in their online teaching. If I scroll down, you'll see that this screen ends with a reflective note-making activity. So this is really there to encourage the learner to reflect on what they've learned and to apply it to their own context. So there's a space for the learner to fill out their response there, and then they can click on the View Feedback button, and we always provide feedback to close that loop. The second screen that I wanted to show you in Module 1 is our Digital Learning Resources screen. So once we've covered the fundamentals of designing the learning experience, we cover the digital resources that you may want to think about using to deliver it. We mentioned the useful links pod, and there's a nice example here. This provides links to lots of different types of digital resources that you could use in your online teaching, links to quizzes, interactive polls, presentations, and open educational resources. If I scroll down to the first activity, you'll see that we have a nice flashcards activity here. And this gives an overview of the different kinds of resources available to you, such as polls, quizzes, online assessment tools, blogs, and social media, along with tips for using them in your online teaching practice. This screen finishes with an audio activity. The learner is prompted to listen to the audio interviews and to consider how other educators have used digital resources in their teaching practices. Once they've listened to the audio clip, they are then presented with a reflective question, which asks them to apply the lessons learned to their own specific context. And again, we provide feedback here on the key takeaway points. I wanted to skip ahead and show you a screen in Module 2. Module 2 builds on the principles that we explored in Module 1, focusing in on how to really develop the online learning experience through developing your online presence, building an effective learning community, and planning your communication strategy and a continuous improvement approach to your online teaching. So again, this screen on developing your online presence starts with a flashcards activity. And this activity has lots of helpful tips for developing that presence. So for example, with the eye contact flashcard, gives tips about if you're holding a one-on-one meeting, if you look directly into your webcam rather than getting distracted by the screen, that will help you to simulate virtual eye contact. And again, we all know that it's difficult to plan, it's difficult to incorporate that informal feedback that you may get as part of in-person teaching. So there's tips on how to build communication into your online teaching practice. Again, there are plenty of practical tips, such as this one, which gives a nice example of a good practice welcome video, which you may want to consider developing for your own online teaching courses. This screen finishes with a skills evaluation. So it prompts the learner to think about their own levels of confidence in particular areas and categorise the different skills accordingly. So the learner can put them in the relevant boxes depending on how confident they feel, whether it's an area that they could work on further or one that they feel pretty confident in. And at the end, they can again click on a view summary button and get a summary of the areas that they feel more confident in and less confident in, so that they can really focus in on the particular aspects that they want to develop further. And now I just wanted to skip ahead to module 4. So module 4 focuses in on wellbeing, engagement, inclusivity and accessibility. And I wanted to show you the screen on planning for accessibility and inclusive design, because I think this is a challenge that we're all struggling with at the moment, how to best go about this in an online context. So if I scroll down, the screen starts with a related concept activity, and this covers the key principles of accessibility. So the key things you need to bear in mind right at the start when you're developing the online learning experience to ensure that it's accessible for all of your students. The second activity really then applies that knowledge. So we explore the needs of a variety of learners. First, we meet Ezra, who has cerebral palsy and uses a wheelchair. Then we meet Francesca, who is deaf and has English as a second language. Soraya, who has dyslexia. Swan, who is an international student and has unexpectedly had to return home. And finally, Hamish, who's trying to balance studying with caring for 2 young children. The activity provides different strategies for making the learning experience more inclusive and accessible, and it asks the learner to consider which strategies will be of benefit for which learners. Once the learner's reflected on that, we provide feedback as to who we think the strategy will benefit. And if I scroll through, you'll see that there are lots of different strategies with associated feedback for making the learning more inclusive. And I think this activity is a really nice way to combine those two things, so making the learning experience accessible, but also making it inclusive. I wanted to show you the looking after your wellbeing screen. So as with in-person teaching, it's obviously very important to make time to look after yourself when teaching online. There's been a lot of media coverage of student wellbeing in the last few months, but I think it's important to recognise that this is also a key concern for staff. This screen has a helpful infographic on tips for self-care when teaching online. So for example, tips on staying connected with your colleagues, making time for those virtual coffee breaks, and also importantly, making time to step away from your screen, to give yourself that break from screen time, which we all need. Also on the screen, we have lots of sources of further support, so signposting to your institutional support services and also to external support services. It's worth mentioning that all of our modules are complemented by a resource bank, and this provides further information and sources of support for the different topics covered. So you can see that here, the different resources are grouped by topic, so creating an inclusive learning experience, keeping your students motivated, supporting your learners' wellbeing, looking after your own wellbeing, and also helping others. And finally, I wanted to show you that each module ends with a module summary and action plan. So the learner is asked to consider what they've learned in this module and to list some key points and techniques that they want to take away and put into practice. We provide a couple of prompts here, but the learner can reorder these if they like. They can delete them, and they can add some of their own tips and techniques that they want to take away. And again, the helpful view summary button so that they can copy and paste or print a copy to save for their records and to refer back to. So I hope that that's given you a bit of a flavour of the forthcoming Teaching Online course. And of course, if you're interested in exploring it in more detail, then we can set you up with a trial. There'll be information on how to request a trial and time for any questions that you may have about the course at the end of the webinar. But for now, I'd like to hand over to my colleague Naomi, who will be telling you more about our other forthcoming course, Learning Online.
Thank you, Kat. So, as we know, many students have been faced with a sudden and unexpected move to online learning and have had little time to prepare effectively for the new mode of study. Learning Online Essential Skills for Success provides an orientation to online learning for higher education students and explains the skills and qualities required to succeed as an online learner and helps the students to recognise and develop their abilities. It's 2 modules of 30 minutes, so it's very concise. We've made it very accessible, both in terms of the design and content and the language level. It's contained lots of practical tips and advice, real student experiences, and plenty of links and signposting and wellbeing support. So the course is relevant to anyone new to online learning, as well as those wanting to build confidence in their online study skills. Our expert panel have reviewed the course throughout its development and bringing with them a wealth of knowledge and insights into the student experience. So there are 2 modules, as I mentioned. The first module, being an online learner, introduces the fundamentals of online learning, covering definitions, basic skills, the qualities of online learners, online safety, and how to safeguard your well-being and combat isolation. The second module, Study Skills for Effective Online Learning, delves deeper into the skills covered in the first module, providing tips and guidance on creating a good study environment, managing your time, establishing a study-life balance, maintaining motivation, reflecting on your learning experiences, and working with others. So again, I'm going to show you a few screens from the modules. Okay, so hopefully you can now see the welcome page for the first module, being an online learner, and similarly to teaching online, we have an introduction, learning outcomes, some information on using the module, and here we can see the various pods that we have for this course. So there are lots of student say pods which provide practical examples and tips and students sharing their own experiences. Useful links to other organisations and resources to support learning. Additional information, so complementary information that builds on and enhances the information contained in the main part of the screen, and finding support pods. So this could be advice on where you can go and seek further support on the areas discussed in the course, and that might be anything from practical support with IT issues to wellbeing support. And again, we have our expert panel listed too. So the first screen is what is online learning. We start with a simple introduction to the different styles of course delivery. I think it's quite important at this stage for students in particular. They may be fully online at the moment, so understanding the different modes, but they may be moving towards a blended approach as they go back to university in September, and perhaps increasingly heading back towards face-to-face teaching. But as we know, it's quite likely that a lot of universities are going to retain elements of online learning. The next screen I'll share with you is qualities of online learners. So here we have a video of tutors and lecturers sharing their own thoughts about what makes a good online learner. We also include transcripts. And here we have a student say pod, so examples of students and how they've dealt with their struggles as an online learner. Below we have an skills evaluation activity. So here they can grade each of these skills according to how confident they feel with them and whether it's an area that they want to develop further. So they drag and drop each of the skills into an appropriate box. If it's an area that they do want to further develop, it will pop up with some immediate feedback, some practical tips on how they can address that area. or it may be signposting to other parts of the course that will help them. Again, once they've completed this activity, they'll be able to view the summary and then either print or save that information to refer back to in future and view our feedback on next steps in developing their skills. Here we have an example of a finding support pod, so where they might go for support with particular areas of concern. And the next screen in this module will be maintaining your well-being. So we start this screen with a poll. In fact, we have 3 poll questions here. So the first is about experiences of feelings of isolation or loneliness while studying. So they can click on the answer and view other students' answers. So this really helps provide reassurance that students are not alone in experiencing struggles. Here we also have about making friends and confidence levels around having strategies in place for maintaining and developing relationships while studying online. And then we move down to the second activity, and this helps students think about how they can build their community as an online learner. So each of these areas thinks about ways in which they can look after their well-being and build their community at the same time. But not only a focus on well-being, but we also highlight employability skills as well. So for example, embracing independent learning has the dual benefit that it will help build connections around their area of study and potential career paths. I'm then going to move on to the second module, so study skills for effective online learning. This is a screen on time management. So this first flashcard activity gets students to think about the amount of time they might need to give to each of these tasks that are part of online learning. So think about all the elements from discussions, research and reading, assignments, group and teamwork, and exams and quizzes. And then below we have another video, and this is students talking about their own strategies for time management. And finally, a reflection question. So students can think about what are their own main challenges in terms of time management, with some hints to think about areas they could improve, and again, some practical feedback. If we move on to the study life balance screen, here we've got a really useful calculator. So students can think about all the elements in their week that they have to fit in. So they can think about how many hours of academic work, but how this sits alongside other things like paid work, cooking, eating, sleeping, traveling, all the things that they need to think about. Once they've added in some times, it will calculate the hours over the course of the week. Let's hope they sleep a little more than 5 hours. It will then say whether they've overcommitted to time during the week or if they have hours left to schedule. And importantly, there's lots of practical information on the importance of each of these areas in maintaining a well-balanced life across their study. And then below we have a couple of scenarios. So here we have Davina balancing her degree with family commitments, and Nico has to schedule his studies around an irregular work pattern. And it's them talking about how they've overcome some of the problems associated with that. At the end of each module, we have a checklist activity just to ensure that students have understood the key concepts presented in the modules. And then finally, the action plan. Again, there'll be 1 or 2 pre-identified items that they can include. If they wish to remove it, they click on the cross, and then they can add their own items and build up their personalised action plan. Again, they can view the summary and then print or copy and paste that elsewhere to refer to in future. And finally, the resource bank, which is broken down into the individual topics throughout the module. And then finally, on the final published version of the programme, there will be a screen that offers a completion button for students to mark completion, so that institutions can track who has actually finished each of the modules or courses. So that's it from me in terms of the demonstration. Again, you'll be welcome to request trial access afterwards, and I'm happy to answer any questions later on. But for now, I think I will hand back to Rosalind.
Thank you, Naomi, and thank you, Kat. So we will now at this point pass to Eleanor, who will walk us through some of the subscription options available to you.
Thank you, Rosalind. So all Epigeum courses can be embedded into your VLE or LMS or accessed via our own online platform, allowing for a quick and easy rollout and a range of blended learning approaches. And however you choose to deliver the courses, we will provide personalised onboarding and technical support every step of the way. Our dedicated team of learning consultants will be on hand to discuss delivery and implementation options, provide ready-made promotional materials, and advise on reporting. Some of the areas that our learning consultants would be asking you to consider would include who is involved, for example, your project team. So the project team will need to look at who they will need to speak to in your IT department, who will act as project champion, or maybe they'll engage multiple project champions within different faculties or departments, who will manage the courses. The learning online and teaching online courses may, for example, be held by your library, and they, in turn, will need to be clear on their target audiences and what the outcomes are for each course. Also, in terms of course delivery, will it be hosted on your VLE or LMS, or accessed directly by the Epigeum platform? Moving on to the blended approach. Is this an approach that you will take? A preference may be for the courses to stand alone, or perhaps to have them allied to workshop activity or tied to your own curriculum aims. Then in terms of the rollout, at what point will you make the courses available? Would you consider making one or more modules available before students arrive at the university or on campus, for example? The next consideration is whether you will be incentivizing participation. Choosing to make a course like this compulsory has its advantages. It can make uptake much easier, of course, but the implementation still has to be well planned so that learning objectives are achieved, not forgetting that you would also need to decide what would happen if a person does not take the mandatory training. If you make the course voluntary, you may wish to consider more awareness-raising activities such as certificates, credits, or badges. Various tools and resources to support you in these promotional activities will of course be provided with each subscription. And lastly, you will want to consider whether the courses need to include some institution-specific content or customization to meet your own specific needs, and how best to present that. Now, this may sound like quite a lot to consider, but you will have, as I mentioned, direct access to your own dedicated team here at Epigeum, who you'll be able to rely on for guidance, support, and shared best practices relating to all of the above. Now, in terms of your next steps, we invite you to take a look at the postcards that we have provided as handouts for today's webinar, and to request trial access to both or either courses. This will allow you to thoroughly evaluate the content of each module and determine how the resources could support your university from August onwards. In terms of details regarding the subscriptions available to you, we have a number of options for you to consider, and conscious of the pressures imposed by the coronavirus pandemic, we have ensured that these two courses are very affordable, with exact pricing dependent on the length of your subscription and also the size of your institution. So to get a quote, please reach out to your academic partnerships contact. My own contact details and those of our Director of Academic Partnerships are on screen now, or you can simply email epigeum@oup.com and we'll get in touch with you directly.